All right, so are you ready to really dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Today we're tackling OCD, but way beyond what people usually think, you know?
Right. Not just the whole, is everything in its place thing.
Exactly. We're going deep with actual posts from Reddit, our OCD to be precise, real people sharing their experiences.
And it gets intense, It really shows you how much more there is to OCD than those common stereotypes.
Yeah, you think of it as being particular, but some of these stories are heavy stuff.
Yeah, and one thing that really jumps out is how much these intrusive thoughts, the really unwanted ones, how much they weigh on people.
Like imagine being totally afraid of the moon just falling from the sky.
And logically, it's not going to happen, but that fear, it doesn't care about logic.
That's what I'm saying. This one person said, the funny thing is that I know it's impossible, yet half my brain still believes it. It's got to be so draining, constantly fighting your own thoughts.
Absolutely, and it can make you feel so guilty, ashamed even. But those thoughts, they don't reflect who the person really is. It's the OCD messing with them.
It's like this bully in your head that won't back off.
Yeah.
You see it in so many posts, this feeling of being tormented by your own mind.
And it impacts everything, not just in your head, but relationships, work, how you see yourself, everything. We found one by Upperton-Fly-4431. They talked about working at Google, a dream job, right?
Oh, wow, yeah.
But their OCD latched onto this fear of getting fired.
Oh, man, in that kind of high-pressure environment, I can't even imagine.
Right. And they said going into the office was like a living hell, their words, because of the anxiety.
Always on edge, worried about messing up. That must be so draining.
Totally. And it's heartbreaking because so many posts talk about how OCD impacts relationships and work and all of that.
Yeah, it's like carrying this weight around all the time that no one else can see.
Exactly. And sometimes, even when something that seems bad happens, it can be a weird relief. Remember Upperton-Fly-4431? They were part of those tech layoffs a while back.
Oh, well, really?
Yeah, and of course, it was rough at first. But get this. They eventually felt this huge sense of relief.
Wow. It's kind of like the fear of it was worse than the thing itself.
You got it. OCD feeds on uncertainty, so even though losing the job was hard, it also took away the thing their OCD was fixated on.
Wow, I never thought about it like that. It really shows you how intense this disorder is, mentally and emotionally.
Yeah, and a lot of users, they describe it as this bully that never gives you a break. When you're constantly battling thoughts, compulsions, it takes a huge toll.
It makes you realize how crucial support is, really understanding what people with OCD go through. It's not just a quirk, it's a whole other way of experiencing the world.
Exactly. And it can be so hard to talk about, so isolating. That's where online communities like our OCD can be so important,
Totally. Finding other people who get it, that's huge. We'll talk more about that right after this. It's like finding your people, when you feel like no one else really understands what it's like inside your head.
Totally. That feeling of not being alone. Huge. Especially with OCD, because there's still so much stigma around mental health.
People keep it to themselves for years, afraid to open up, afraid of being judged.
Exactly. So to have a place online where you can connect with others who really get it.
It's huge. One user, Stress Princess, talked about how finding this subreddit made them realize they weren't alone.
And you can just feel that relief, like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one who thinks like this.
Right. It's the internet doing something good for once, building these connections, these bridges of understanding.
100%. And you see it throughout these posts, people sharing what helps them cope, offering advice.
Even just little comments like, I feel you, or you're not alone.
Exactly. Just that validation can mean the world.
Reminds me of that saying, shared joy is a double joy, shared sorrow is half a sorrow.
It's true. Just being able to talk about it, even the tough stuff, can make it feel less scary, less overwhelming.
And it's not just about getting support. It's also about seeing that things can get better. Right?
Absolutely. Because it's easy to feel hopeless when you're struggling with OCD.
Like, is this it? Is this my life now?
But then you read about others who are managing their symptoms, who are living full lives. And it gives you hope. It shows you that recovery, whatever that looks like for you, is possible.
You know what else really struck me? The humor. Even when people are talking about their darkest moments, there's this thread of humor running through it.
Oh, yeah. That dark humor, that ability to find a little bit of lightness when things feel impossible, that's resilience.
Like one user talked about how their phone took a nosedive into the toilet after they peed because of their compulsions. And even then, they found a way to laugh about it.
That's amazing. It's finding those little moments of humor, of connection, that can make such a difference,
Because dealing with OCD, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Right? There are going to be good days and bad days, setbacks, all of that. Having a supportive community, even if it's online, can make all the difference.
Speaking of which, one thing I found really interesting was how open people were about their different experiences with treatment, with finding what helps them cope.
Makes sense, right? Because there's no one-size-fits-all solution with OCD.
Not at all. Like some people find therapy super helpful,
Right.
like ERP.
Exposure and response prevention, for those who don't know the lingo.
Right. And basically, it involves gradually facing your fears in a safe way.
Right. The idea is to help you learn to manage that anxiety without resorting to compulsions.
So it's like retraining your brain over time.
Exactly. But then you have other people who find different approaches helpful.
Like what? I'm curious.
One user talked about treating their intrusive thoughts like a bully, like literally picturing a bully and telling it to back off.
I love that.
Did it work? They said it made a huge difference that day.
See, there's those little shifts in perspective.
Totally. It's all about finding what works for you. And it's not always therapy or medication. Sometimes it's the little things.
Like that user who said they cope by doing everything in fours. Like it has to be four of everything.
It gives them a sense of control, of predictability. We all crave that to some extent.
So true. And, with OCD, those routines and rituals aren't just habits. They're about managing some really intense anxiety.
Exactly. And what I find so inspiring is the resilience. It would be so easy to just let OCD take over, to let it define your life.
But these Redditors, they're out there fighting every day. It's really quite amazing.
It is, and it really highlights something we need to talk about more. Challenging those assumptions about OCD.
100%. Because
Wow.
it's so much more than what we often see on the surface.
Right. These Reddit posts really bring that home, how personal the experience of OCD is.
It's not just a diagnosis in a textbook, it's someone's daily life.
Exactly. And when we remember that, it changes things.
It reminds us to lead with empathy, to believe people when they share their struggles.
It's about that human connection, isn't it? Creating a space where people feel heard, supported.
Absolutely. Where people with OCD feel safe, seeking help, being open about their experiences, knowing they're not alone. And online communities like this subreddit, they're a huge step in the right direction.
They really are. Because when we break down the stigma, these conversations can happen.
And that leads to more understanding, more compassion, better support.
Exactly. That's what it's all about.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into the world of OCD through the eyes of this ROCD community, I'm left wondering, how can we, all of us, do better? How can we create a world where people with OCD truly feel seen, heard, supported? That's something to think about. Until next time, keep asking those questions, keep learning, and keep diving deep.